So my name is Beth Bird. I'm the Executive Director of the Autism Society, and October is a very busy month. It is National Autism, well, not just autism, it's National AAC, Augmentative Communication Month. It's also National Anti-Bullying Month, and it's National Employment Month for individuals with developmental disabilities. So all very, very important. We are happy today to have some great presenters who are going to share their perspectives from a professional point of view and a personal point of view. So I love that. So I'm going to mess up your last name, but I'm going to let you correct me.
Okay.
So we are recording this. We always get that question. It will be recorded. We'll send it out tomorrow, and then it goes up on our website. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and so can double check in the chat while she's talking. I'll be looking, and then the last half hour, it'll be, am I going to say it correctly? Esteban? Did I say that right?
Esteban, yes.
Yeah, Esteban Ortiz from State Council. He's fairly new to our San Bernardino office, so we're happy to have him, and he's going to facilitate our panel. So we also have our lovely Spanish interpreter, Miriam. So if you need Spanish interpretation, please click on the world button, and you can choose either English or Spanish. So I think that's all the housekeeping, and thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Suad. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Suad Bisogno. I'm the CEO of Integrated Resources Institute. We are actually an employment provider in the Orange County and Los Angeles locations, but we're also expanding to inland, working on San Diego, and working on providing some services in Northern California. In addition to that, I'm the Vice President of California APSE. It's the Association of Persons Receiving or Promoting Employment's First Services. APSE, the National APSE chapter, has been instrumental in making changes to help people with disabilities become employed in their communities. They've provided advocacy on the federal and state level to make it so. And the California chapter has worked alongside of many advocacy organizations over the last couple of years to also help pass some legislation to make employment real employment for real wages a priority. So the passage of SB 639, shout out to State Council for leading the way on that. And then also attending some stakeholder meetings and meetings with Department of Developmental Services to ensure that not just employment, but the quality of employment services is really focused in on. And just a quick example of that is one of the quality incentive payments that's given to, typically it's given to providers to help encourage somebody with the CIE. They'll get a bonus to help offset some of the cost and that is that's used to, that the employer uses to invest in getting a person a CIE is competitive integrated employment. So that's one of the areas that they've traditionally been giving incentives for, but we couple of us as stakeholders met with DDS and were able to negotiate workforce capacity incentive payments to help our staff become certified in ACRE, which is a nationally accredited training for rehabilitation educators. And it's one of the first times that the state has actually incentivized advancements for workforce training. What I also wanted to share before I go into further detail is please utilize the chat to ask questions. I wanted this to be informal, and I wanted to really gear it towards the people that are attending this training to see what questions you might have or the challenges you might have, and give you that feedback and that guidance. And we've seen as Cal APSE, we've done these social hours every other month where we meet with people and just keep it kind of open, and the conversation leads us to many different areas that are all really important and part of the disability employment discussion. So I'll be keeping my eye out on the chat. But I'll take you back a little bit for our organization, and the reason why I'm going to take it back with our organization for Integrated Resources Institute is because we were one of the first providers, if not the first provider, because I don't think anybody was keeping track of stuff like this back then, to provide employment services for people with disabilities. We've been doing it since 1987. We started doing it as a grant-based service. You know, the ADA wasn't around, employment wasn't a thing, even with DDS, DOR wasn't really in place in the capacity that it is right now. We applied for Integrated Resources Institute, and I'll probably refer to us as IRI ongoing, applied for several grants, state and federally, to get people placed into jobs. And we were really successful. And actually, I wish I brought it in here, but I ended up finding all these old articles of the work that we did from the 80s and 90s. And it's beautiful, but it's also sad because some of the language that's used, you know, there's like one headline is like putting, and they use the R word into jobs. And so we've come a long way with the way that the world sees people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But IRI was well ahead of our time when it came to that. And we've been doing employment services since then. And so a little bit about what we do today, but before we do that, I really wanted to focus on why we're doing the work that we do today. Is we started to see the system build out, and we started seeing Department of Rehabilitation becoming a gateway to employment for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And though DOR has come a long ways, during the 90s, DOR was rejecting a lot of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and considering them unemployable. And so the system would say, you need to go and access, if you want a job, go through DOR, and DOR would come back and say, no, we can't help you. And our founder, Steve Zivelich, said, no, that's not okay. I'm going to get them a job. And so we navigated several different service codes. Like we do one-to-one supports, and we didn't do it through DOR, through supported employment. And so we had to get creative, and we're actually seeing some of that happen today. We're going to be seeing the rollout of proper, hopefully knock on wood, proper tailored day services. And that's going to allow for more opportunities for community inclusion, for job carving, to support people while they're volunteering or interning and working. And that's kind of what IRI has been doing in a nutshell. And so IRI decided we're going to use the day program service model. And we negotiated with the regional centers to figure out how to provide a one-to-one service through the day program model, though the funding was abysmal. And, you know, we were also advocates. IRI is very much advocates. So for years, we were like telling people, like, we're, you know, 85% of the people we support, and Xavier and a couple other on here, are employed in their community. And it ranges from like 85 to at times 95% of the people we support are employed in their communities. And when we try to promote that, we're not trying to like this, we want all providers to be doing this work, because we're dealing with 80% unemployment rate for people with disabilities. But when we explained the funding to a lot of these providers, a lot of them, you know, turned away, and they said, our board would never approve that. That's not financially feasible. And IRI operated very low administratively for many, many years. And even to this day, if you compare our operations to the operations of many other nonprofits, you would, or for-profits that are in this line of work, you'd probably be shocked. But we decided to take that stand and to say that this isn't just about operating as a business, even though it's so important to do that. We need to make sure we're not operating in the red, but we also see this as a civil rights issue and a civil rights movement that our founding, you know, the founders of our organization really believed in, and that I believe in. And that's where we're at today. So a little bit more about IRI is we've been, right now we're vendored through the technically the community integration model, but we are very fortunate to have negotiated a rate closer to supported employment. We're starting to see that even through tailored services. So we're also in the middle of some transformation at our organization. We're being able to spend more time with our workforce, training them, putting them through trainings, minimizing. The goal would be to minimize some of the caseloads so the managers aren't having to carry as heavy of a caseload. And that's, we're still waiting for the funding to kick in. But what we're seeing more than ever is the discussion change in the meetings with providers, where people are now interested in the idea of providing employment services because it's more financially feasible than just doing community integration. And so there's a piece of me that's excited. And if you aren't familiar with the Tailored Day Services program, maybe we could, Beth, we could drop something in the chat, but I'm really excited that we're going to be, that there's going to be now a service code that's dedicated to what IRI has been doing for, the last 20 or so years, and providers can access that. The only concern I do have with that is that I'm in a lot of stakeholder meetings with vendors and with the regional centers, and it sounds like people are going to try to move in this direction, not because they necessarily believe that it's the right thing to do, then they're doing it for business viability, because there's a lot of changes happening with regulations and with there are a lot of companies' current funding that, they're seeing it as possibly an avenue to go down. But what's really beautiful about Tailored Day Services is it supports somebody to tailor their day. And what that looks like, and the regulations outline this, is it can support somebody to get a job. It could support somebody to go to school. It could support somebody to volunteer or intern. And then it can also just support somebody to build out true community independence or interdependence. I try to be careful with the term independence, because we're all interdependent in some capacity. So just keeping that in mind. And so it's giving us a really amazing opportunity to create a day that includes employment, that includes volunteering, that includes school. Because right now the service options are community integration program, which is like, in some respect, and I don't want to be too hard on this, but in some instances, or a day program, and in some instances it starts to feel more like a day wasting program. And please keep in mind that I'm also an advocate, so sometimes I also say things that some people might find offensive, but it really is like, would you be okay with going on field trips all day for the rest of your life? Some might say yes, but I think the expectation is that we all contribute in some capacity, and that means working and volunteering and again, building out that meaningful day. And so the options were day program, which many parents and many families really ended up falling back on. And it wasn't because the quality of service, then it was about having access to a provider that could be with their child for at least 6 hours a day while they worked. So it was day programs as an option, or the second option was supported employment. And if anybody's gone through the supported employment process, you'll know that you go from the regional center, get referred to DOR, and then go through an intake process, and then get connected with a provider. And you could potentially be sitting at home for a year before you get a job. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so bear with me. And so many people don't actually go down the supported employment route, not necessarily because they don't want a job. I think the expectations is that everybody works. At least that's the goal that we have today. I think it's more so because people didn't want people, as in the person being supported. Their families didn't want them sitting around all day waiting for this job to come to their doorsteps. So I think that we're in the midst of a paradigm shift, especially during COVID. What we discovered is a lot of these day programs couldn't meet. What we discovered during COVID is that people had individualized needs and supports, and that looked different for every single person. And so when you had congregate or segregated services during COVID, they all a lot of them went remote. And so your only option was virtual classroom instruction or virtual training or virtual hangouts or virtual, I think bingo, whatever they were doing virtually to like keep people quote unquote busy. And now that we're moving into this new world, many of those providers can't handle the amount of people that are going to be transitioning back into or wanting actual real services again versus this virtual. And I think that this pivot to tailored day services is going to be crucial, because if they don't pivot, I hope that everybody pivots and they pivot for the right reason, because there's going to be a lot of people without services similar to what we were dealing with the DOR process. And again, if you have any questions, please ask me, because some of the stuff I say, I'm like thinking about, I was like, this might be foreign to some people. Okay, so then we had the traditional supported employment model, which is, you get a job that exists out there. There's a job description for it, and you get it, and then you work that job, and then the coaching is there 100% of the time, and then it fades to 80, 60, 40, 30, 20, and then down to 20, and then you transition back to the regional center. And many advocates, including APSE and others, we're advocating for a more customized approach when it comes to employment. And it's not a new concept. This concept's been around, but hasn't really been embraced. And what customized employment is really carving out the job. And it's really about getting to know the person. And the current supported employment model doesn't really allow for those opportunities to do true discovery. And so, Inland is very fortunate. You have DOR that firmly believes in customized employment. You have a couple providers that are doing customized employment. You probably need way more providers doing it. And the only reason I say DOR, not every DOR location is created equally. So our DOR location in the Valley is still not offering customized employment as a service. Customized employment is beautiful because it allows, again, that job carving, that meeting with the employer and figuring out what their needs are, and seeing how the individual that you just spent 40 hours, 60 hours with doing discovery, and seeing what their strengths are, and going back to the employer with the proposal with those specific duties, and saying, I know that you have this job opening and it's for 30 hours a week, and this is the duties on the description. What if we carve out 5 of those duties, and it would be 3 or 4 hours a week, not 3 or 4, like 10 hours a week, and this individual can do those duties and do it extremely well. And so what was really wonderful for IRI is we never stopped customizing, or while some providers stopped and halted like employment services and even job coaching services during the pandemic, we took it as an opportunity to like go with it and run. And so during COVID, I think IRI, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, we secured a record amount of employment opportunities for the people we support. And some of that was traditional. Xavier's an example of that. And some of it was customized. And And actually a lot of it was customized. It was really beautiful seeing that. We actually customized the job for Xavier, but that didn't ended up working out, but that's okay because Xavier has had a job now for a year and it's been very successful. We just, and the needs are so great with the employment sites. We just, in the Los Angeles area, we were able to carve out a job for an individual with more significant needs, at a factory that the business, their focus is working with the wiring and cables for set lighting and music. So they do a lot of the music festivals, they do a lot of the TV sets, and they're just focused on cables and wiring. And so we were fortunate enough, and this is so important for families to remember, is we were fortunate enough to have a connection through a family member. So this individual's uncle works for the company. Me and the program manager and the job coach were able to schedule a meeting. We first did a Zoom meeting with their headquarters in Florida, and then scheduled an in-person meeting and then a walkthrough of the employment site. And when we did the walkthrough, we started making notes of all the things that, all the responsibilities of the staff that were there, and we're able to carve out and notice a huge need. One of them was that whenever they got shipments of, when the sets or the festival was done with the products, they would get a huge shipment of it and it would be waiting for somebody to process. And sometimes the wait took a while because there was still a lot of inventory that they had available. But the process of the receiving was time consuming, that it would just be like, whenever they had free time, they would process it. So there was this pile of cables, and every cable needed to be tested to make sure that it was working. So there's a machine that they plug in the cable and you wait it, 20 seconds and it turns red or it turns green. If it's green, it's good. If it's red, it's bad. Red, you throw it in the bin to be disposed of. Green, you roll it back up. And there's some intricate details involved that, and I think he's getting closer to doing those things where, depending on the prongs and the length of the cable, you attach like a specific sticker for it, so it goes into the specific bin without people having to like look at how many prongs and how many feet the cable is. And so typically the job duty is you do that and 20 other things for a full-time position. And we were able to carve out that one duty for that individual. And he works anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a day, 2 times a week. And he's doing really well. My manager just shared a picture of him with me, and it's just so exciting to see that happen. And in most standards, that individual would probably be considered unemployable, or DOR would not probably accept him. And I think most providers would probably have not considered even servicing him based on his needs. And I think that's really important in IRI and APSE. And so we're so in sync with this, is we believe everybody works and that everybody has gifts and talents to share. And I think if we hone in on that at an early age with the people we support, with your children, and even if we don't do that at an early age and we start doing it when they're 40, we're going to start seeing some beautiful things happen. And I'll give you an example. We supported a woman who, she's close to 50, has a now 18-year-old daughter, but at that point she was 16 years old living with her, and had never had a job in her entire life. And she was referred to us because she was so tired of living paycheck to paycheck, but also so afraid of having a job, that the service coordinator referred her to us because we had that volunteer and work and, building that tailored life. And so she ended up receiving supports from us. We ended up getting her an internship within maybe the first 6 months. and she gets scared in the workplace. You know, she's never really done this. She's 40 plus years old, almost 50. And at the beginning, there was a lot of support that was needed. And it was more anxiety and fear and, you know, feeling like she was going to forget something. And to see her now and the confidence and her skills and her abilities and her communication has grown, and she has relationships in the workplace. And, you know, she's 50 and she's first time having a job. So just keeping that in mind, that it's never too early and it's never too late to talk about employment. We also, you know, I think that one of my fears as an advocate is that I firmly believe that the closing of sheltered workshops, even though it's painful for many people, is a good thing. And I think that people are going to be given opportunities, and I see it similar like the glass ceiling. Like, you know, for women for many years, we didn't have the right to vote. You know, we didn't have opportunities that were similar to men. And we were okay, even though we were looking out and we could kind of see that world, but we were okay with it until we broke that glass ceiling. And it's like, oh my God, I could have had this entire time and I just didn't. And so I think that we're going to see a bit of that. But I guess my concern is that we believe, IRI and APSE believes that people we support should be given real opportunities. And what we're starting to see is a lot of training programs being built out. And what that means is agencies are moving from, you know, segregated day programs to building out a work training program. And a work training program, what it does, and as you know, many of the families here, I want you to all be aware, is work training programs means here's the person that's being supported and here's a job. And they're going to create a layer in between that stops people, like another glass ceiling, from getting to real work. And I know Xavier had that experience where he was in a work training program and hated it because he's like, I just want a job. You know, I don't need you to teach me like I'm a child things when I'm ready to be here, and why am I being forced and being stuck here? And so, you know, Xavier is a great advocate for himself, and I think he was able to advocate, and he had to advocate really hard to make that a reality for himself. But I think a lot of the people you know, IRI supports, and a lot of people in the service industry are not going to advocate as well as maybe Xavier did. So I guess a fear for me as a, you know, social justice advocate is that people don't get trapped in these work readiness programs, where historically, when people go into these work readiness programs, they don't end up walking out with jobs. They walk out being told if they were ready to advance to their employment department. And I can't tell you the amount of people that spent 2 years in a work training program that come to our service after being told that they weren't ready for employment yet, or they need more time, or they need more training. And I wasn't told that when I got my first job. You all probably weren't told that you needed more training when you got your first job. So to just add layers and barriers for people, it just doesn't make much sense. A little bit about anybody have any questions in regards to services and what we're doing and where we're going? I'm going to maybe switch over to discussing a little bit more about APSE.
We'll give it just a second, Suad, while people are running. I know it takes me a little bit to type in the chat. One of the things I love about what your organization does, and I just want to make sure people heard it, is that some vendors tend to take individuals that in their mind, they think is more capable, right? Would be easier for them to get a job. And then they don't go through a discovery process. they will go, yes, you can put that in there. I'll let you, you do that one. They don't go through a discovery process. They don't take the time to really get to know that person's gifts and talents and do the job matching. How important do you think, when people skip that step, how important do you think that step is?
It's crucial. And I think what ends up happening is it's built into the supported employment model. Unfortunately, there's no money invested. I think my colleague said, I haven't even dealt with supported employment recently, but like to place somebody in a job, I think it's like a $700 payment, maybe even less. And so if you think about it, if it takes 40 hours to do proper discovery for somebody, and let's do the math. Let's say it's 600, because I think it was anywhere between 4 and 700. So 600 divided by 40, I need my handy dandy calculator. That's $15 an hour that if they were going to do proper discovery, they needed to invest that, and that's the rate. It's a little unique because at Inlands, you have your DOR that actually does believe in the discovery process and the customized employment process. But I think what's occurring, and actually IRI, what ends up happening is if somebody goes through that customized employment process, they're kind of stuck in that bubble of the customized employment process. And Xavier is kind of a perfect example. Sorry, I keep on picking on you. We found him a customized job, and then we also found him a traditional job. And currently the customized employment process, in the way that people are doing it, it's like you're either supported employment or your customized employment. You can't be both. But regardless of whether they end up receiving a traditional job or a customized job, that the discovery process is crucial. And that's where, for us, it's not just like asking questions. And that's what the supported employment model typically does. There's like a form you fill out. What do you like? What do you don't like? If I've done an intake recently where the woman was like, I want to work at Starbucks. And the discovery was she likes to drink coffee at Starbucks. She has no interest in working at Starbucks. And if that person was in supported employment, they would have been finding her a job at a Starbucks location based on what she said.
Yeah.
Go
ahead. I was going to say, no, that's a great example, right? Because sometimes, even myself, right, I'll say something I think I like, and it takes somebody else kind of digging a little bit more and figuring out, well, is that really what you like? Or, what is it you like about that situation? We got another question, and then we have one from Tina. Do you think it is the lack of looking forward for people who are stuck in the past that contributes to the lack of discovery? In other words, a fear of change for those who have been programs for a long time.
So I think that change is tough for everybody. And I'm just going to tell you, we supported a gentleman that came from a sheltered workshop. We got him a job, and it was so exciting. And his ID team came together to celebrate, and we're like celebrating that he was earning minimum wage for the first time in his entire life. This is, I think he was like, he's about 55 years old. And I remember when the service coordinator brought up, I wasn't there, but my colleague told me, brought up the rate of pay he was making. His response was, no, that's too much money. And so even though he was experiencing what, we thought was a celebration, it was like still kind of a shock to him to hear those words, that he was making that kind of money. And I think that I'm looking at this, like, I think that this question of like, being stuck in the past contributed to the lack of discovery. I think that this applies to providers. We're seeing reform with HCBS compliance, where now there is a law, the federal law, that is going to require every provider to be in compliance with the home and community-based waiver, which means people have the choice of what their day looks like. People, and there's a lot impacting residential providers as well. So, a person needs to have access to, if they live in in a residential setting, to the access to locking their door for their bedroom, having their own space, choosing what they eat, and for community, for the HCBS, for the services and the programs, there's also a lot of similar things about, does this person truly have a choice as to what their day looks like? And so many providers are having a hard time. I think I was working with North LA on this, and they have 700 providers that are out of compliance, something like that. And every regional center, and I don't know what Inland's doing, because every regional center got a lump sum of money to implement some training or some supports to get everybody on course with this, because March 2023, if you're not in compliance, that service is not going to get funded for anymore. But we're March 2023, and we still have providers fighting this, thinking that this compliance piece and people don't need access to a locked bedroom. People are still fighting that. And then I think that one of the statistics that I wanted to note is, I think some of the biggest challenges we face in employment is, I hate, like, it sounds weird saying this here, but family, like stakeholders, the people that are the closest to the individuals. I know that most of you all here are here because you're interested in employment, or interested in the topic of employment. But when we look at the numbers, the raw data of people that are unemployed, you'll see that there's more people that are employed living at home compared to another service like supported living service. But when you compare the amount of people, adult working age people that are living at home, and compare it to the amount of people that are working, it is the lowest percentage. So people that live with their families, people with disabilities that live with their families, are less likely to work than people living in other residential settings. And so we do see that. And, I'm, like I mentioned, I talked to I'll give you personal stories. One of my friends reached out to me during COVID, because even though he kept his brother kind of private, his brother has autism. He lived in a group home, and called me because the group home had told him he wasn't allowed to see his brother. And we all know what that felt like for anybody that was being supported in any of these residential settings. And so he said, I'm taking my brother home. I can't not see my brother. And so they pulled him from the group home. He moved into his home, and they had him in a site-based day program as well. And that site-based day program went fully remote. So his brother was just sitting at home, hopping on a Zoom for 10 minutes for as long as he could tolerate. And that was his day. His brother has higher needs. He has a little bit of echolalia, but more so like it's really stuck and fixated on routines. And we'll talk about those routines. Like it's October, but he'll start talking about his August beach trip that every time we see him, he'll part of the daily discussion is talking about in August, he's going to go to the beach, and that's what and kind of playing it out in his brain. And so he came home, and the brother called me, and we were like, you want us? Hey, I have a service. We can provide the service for you. And from being at a site-based day program for 9 years to working at Angel Stadium, which one of his other things that he talked about is baseball all the time. He loved baseball. And so to go from like field trips and, coloring books all day to working at Angel Stadium in with their merch in their merch store is just like for the family. I don't think that they ever thought that was ever an option. And because they believed, after speaking to me, they believed that could be an option. They supported it, and we all worked together to support him to get to that place.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect question. And for your next segue is, how do we make these changes quickly for adults who have been part of day programs that no longer serve them.
So this is so hard, Tina, because this has been like, I'm going to just say it, it's like a volcano ready to burst. And what we're seeing is that these day programs some of them have not pivoted or prepared for the ending of alternative services. So a little step back, there was traditional services, which is the way that we provided services this entire time. And then COVID hit and they allowed, regulation allowed for this opportunity to do alternative services, which means anything that is different than your traditional service. So that's when we saw these remote, bingo games and, cooking classes and all this stuff throughout the day. So people that were going to a day program could now hop on these Zooms and do that. And what we're seeing is that there was still hope. Many providers still had hope that these day programs, that alternative services would stick around, or some kind of, aspect of it would be around. And it's not. It's done. December 31st, alternative services is over. And the only service that the provider is able to provide is traditional. I could tell you right now at IRI, we've been taking people at our organization for the last 2 years that have come from these services. I just gave you an example of my friend's brother. And we're doing our best, but in Orange County, I think our wait list is like 60 people right now. And we already know in specifically in Orange County and not in Inland, and that might be good data to get from Inland, there's a huge, I think there's like 300 people at Elwyn. Elwyn is a huge site-based day program. They're closing their doors. They're leaving California. They're done with California. But that leaves people without services. I want to say the only saving grace right now, and this is what regional centers are using, is getting providers to transition to tailored day services. And they're making it easy for current providers by allowing them to have an addendum to their current day program service. So it's not like they have to rebuild a whole new service, service plan, submit it to the regional center, go back and forth for a year before their contract's approved. We're looking at, they could probably get vendored for tailored day services in less than a month. The issue there is that if the agency isn't pivoting, so if this is a question for you, like your specific circumstances, is asking your provider if they are doing tailored day services. And to some degree, maybe even supporting them with recruitment, maybe even finding a staff, because the tailored day service is a one-to-one model. What's been being provided is maybe 1 or 2 staff in a Zoom meeting for 20, 30 people. And so there is no way they could turn 2 people into 30 in 2 months. I mean, is it 2 months? Yeah, 2 months. It's just impossible. So I think we're really headed into a storm of people not having access to services. And it's going to be important that if you're working with a provider to really advocate for tailored day. We have another question.
I do. Well, I want to ask you, I'm trying to be politically correct to some extent. So in the past, we've had some experience with tailored day services. And we would hear things like, if you wanted to start your own business, this person could help you, with the finances and the advertising and the marketing. But because there was no training, what happened was it ended up being more of a personal assistant or a friend, or it really wasn't moving the adult into anything positive. It just kind of got stuck. And what's to stop that from happening now?
So for business development, I don't recommend tailored day services. the rate is too low to support that level of skill. I recommend self-determination, because you can carve out, and that's like what's so beautiful about self-determination is you say, I need somebody that is skilled, and go into the market and find what that rate is of a person that could help develop a business. You know, you can go on LinkedIn and find these people and ask them what their going rate is and carve that out of the budget. Tailored day services is, you know, right now, I think what we're looking at is a reimbursement rate of $40 something an hour. Like, that's how much a person that's developing, if somebody wants to help you develop your business, that's how much you would be paying them. So there's no overhead available to support that. Yeah, so that I think is a challenge, but we've seen it happen. But it's usually, for us, when we've seen it happen with an IRI, it's usually because we have heavy manager involvement and I mean, even executive director involvement to make those things happen.
So what kind of things would you recommend tailored day service for then?
For the I mean, even for the customized employment piece, I think it's still, the funding is too low. I think that you're going to see some providers not truly do customized employment under tailored day because they're going to argue, you know, I need to have a higher caliber staff. But that's what's really great. Like, Beth, that's what we worked on, is they're going to say we couldn't train them to be customized employment specialists, but we just worked, me and 5 other advocates worked with Nancy to get the state to reimburse the ACRE training. You know, we pulled out numbers, we pulled out literature, we averaged the cost of what the ACRE training would cost an employer with overhead and expenses. And the employers can get $1,900 reimbursed to put their staff through ACRE training. The state, even though they haven't fully rolled out the reimbursement, which they will, you can now get your staff trained in ACRE to do customized employment. It is not bulletproof. Putting your staff through a training for customized employment is not bulletproof. They need hands-on experience and a little bit more than that, but at least we're one step closer. So that's the biggest challenge is, you know, even within my organization, you know, when I go back and look at like what staff continuously ask for, it's like more training, more support, more development. And we're working towards that. And so, you know, thankfully for the Burns and Associates rate study, we can start affording more advanced training and hiring skilled people to do some training, you know, hiring a training and development, you know, manager to go out there in the field and provide training. You know, there's all these things that we're doing, but without the rates truly supporting it, it becomes a challenge. And then we had a couple questions, Brent. What other states would be good to relocate to that? Okay, so I'm going to be 100% honest. California is the best state to live in for services. It's not perfect, but we have Title 17 regulation, which is called the Lanterman Act, that it allows an entitlement to services. And so if you have an intellectual or developmental disability, you can get assessed, get regional center services, and get, you know, in theory, get a service immediately afterwards. For employment services in other states, there could be like a 10, 15 plus year waiting list. So I've had people during the pandemic, families that we support, move out of state and then only move back because their child had access to no services out there in Texas or Florida or whatever it is. You know, we pay a lot in taxes here comparative to other states, but it really is, you know, a lot of that goes back to the services that we end up accessing. Okay, so do you have any suggestions how to find some type of internship to help lead to a job in a front end we have limited choices. So this goes back to also building out relationships. So I don't know if we are currently struggling to find. I mean, are they like, I guess I have more questions for you than anything. It's like what is, you know, struggling finding a type of internship? I can't, most employers that we bring up, like my issue at my employment site, you know, my organization is I don't want internship being thrown out there as frequently as sometimes it is, because it's being overused. But for something like, the front end web design is a perfect opportunity for internship. So I guess I'm having a hard time understanding this, because I think that if the relationship is there, or a relationship is built with some of these businesses, they would be open to like having an intern. I can't imagine them not being okay with free.
So Suad, are you taking clients here in the inland
So
area?
so we were on pause for a little bit because we were going to go through DOR, but I don't know if we were really built, like our service is really more like a tailored day service. So now that we know that that's the route that we're going to go, we're going to be applying for vendorization, but we are courtesy vendored. So we do have clients that are through the courtesy vendorization process. So that's a little bit of a loophole that if anybody on here is from inland, didn't hear me say that. And then we also take self-determination clients.
Yeah.
So we have a manager that actually grew up in the Inland Empire. So she's like so eager to support her community. Her name is Brandy. So she's wonderful.
So Janine, that was my hint to you.
Oh yeah, there we
To
go.
your question, because I'm a parent, I've got a 29-year-old, and we've been trying this employment thing for way too long. And sometimes it's about finding the right match with the agency that is working for employment. They are not all built the same. They don't have the same philosophy. They don't have the same training. So sometimes you, instead of taking, what Regional Center, Department of Rehab suggests, doing your homework and finding one that you think might be a little more assertive in certain things or be a better match for you. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes it is like, and it's like I want to be mindful. Like sometimes when the family or comes in and does some job development or like job, but it is about like networking a little bit, like knowing your connections, and even if it's once removed and you call your buddy, or like you're at a dinner party and somebody says they work for a web design company, and making sure to take down that number and connecting your job developer with that entity. And that's how we found that job. It was the mom had reached out to her brother and pleaded with him to consider it. He connected us with HR. We explained what we did. And also, a lot of times the discovery is we met with the two representatives from HR via Zoom from Florida, and one of them's like, I have a son with autism, and this is inspiring for me. He's in high school right now, and I don't even know where to start. So then I connected with their APSE entities in Florida and connected her with some tools, and she's like, I didn't even know this even existed. So I think that's another way that providers end up making a greater impact as well. When we do that, is you never know, you're a lot of times everyone has a relative with a disability. And so when we're meeting with these employers, we end up discovering that connection. But I do want to also note that I need to do better at this. This is one of my goals for the near future, is that we need to do better at not marketing hire a person with a disability and marketing hire a person with A, B, C, and D gifts. And we're doing our best to work towards that. And I think that the reason why we bring up the hire a person with a disability is because for a while society did not embrace like the surprise. I don't know how else to explain it. And so it was almost like making sure the employer understood our job coaching services and all these things, so that when, we got going and there might've been a little hiccup along the way, there wasn't any resentment towards us or the individual. But I think we're getting closer to a place where people with disabilities are embraced and included. There's diversity and inclusion, and, making sure that disability is part of the, the equation when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And so we're seeing a lot of that. I know I'm running short on time, so I'm going to start answering more questions and going on less tangents. So I'm going to argue, like all businesses, especially day programs returning from COVID and saying they can't find people to work. I'm going to argue that they fail to prepare. And I could tell you, I got like 3 managers. I think there's like 3 or 4 of them on this Zoom. We know it's hard recruiting, but we're one-to-one, and we never had, like, we have a recruiter constantly recruiting, constantly hiring. We hired 9 people this month. I think we hired a total of 80 people during this past year. So I think that some of this is like an excuse where they just, they were comfortable with alternative services and never really thought about increasing their 2 staff back to 20, and now they're in this pickle. So it's not 100% their fault. COVID was intense. But I think that we all had to go through that, and IRI is a one-to-one. We support 180 people and we have 210 employees. We had to figure it out. To develop the relationship, to not getting any help with DOR. Yeah, I'm sorry. DOR is, people think DOR provides like the actual service, but they're just a referral business. So like, just like regional center, you're not going to go to regional center and say, hey, help me get a job. You may say that, and they're going to refer you to somebody that's supposed to do the work. So, just keeping that in mind. Yeah. So connect anonymous attendee. Go ahead and connect. I'm going to add my email to the chat. Oh, I'm sent it to host and channel. Sorry. Oh, I can't. So you know what? I added my email to the chat, and I realized I can only send it to hosts and panelists. So
I'll send it out right now.
Cool. If you can add my email, and then also our website, which is www.irioc.org. And yeah, and I see Keith, you mentioned that he wasn't interested in washing dishes or doing kitchen work. However, he chose to work at the convention center, and he does that, and I think some of the people here, are doing work that they thought that they wouldn't be doing, or wasn't necessarily the dream, but they absolutely love it. And I think the biggest part of work, one of the biggest parts of work, one is earning money. Everyone wants to make money, but I think the relationships that we build in the workplace. And so convention center probably has a lot of coworkers. Camaraderie, relationships, and we all need that. And then I think that we got that answer. Okay, IRI, Integrated Resources Institute, is the name of our organization. So that's IRI. Department of Rehabilitation is DOR. They're a generic service for employment. So everybody with a disability has access to DOR, not just regional center clients. So the way that Title 17, which is the regulation, the Lanterman Act that created Department of Developmental Services, creates the regional center, funds the providers. In statute, it says, if you want employment services, you first have to tap into generic services. The generic service in our state is Department of Rehabilitation. Department of Rehabilitation has come a long ways, but is not customized enough to support the people that we provide supports to. And so what we see is 80+% unemployment rate for the people we support. And it's because the service models, 80% unemployment rate, and IRI has an 85-90% employment rate. So, when you customize and you put the person in the center and you build the service around them, you see really great outcomes. Cool. Thank you, Beth.
No, that was awesome.
7:30, right on the nose.
I knew this group wasn't going to be shy about asking questions. They just needed a little time to warm up. So that's great. So Esteban, I'm going to let you come on and introduce yourself and a little bit about your role now at State Council. And Esteban's kindly agreed to host our panel. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Okay, so my name is Esteban Ortiz. I am the Associate Governmental Program Analyst for the San Bernardino Regional Office. We work with San Bernardino County, Riverside County, Inyo County, and Mono County. Just to give you guys a brief background for me, I have approximately about 14 years in mental health. Okay, I did in different capacities. I've done wraparound, therapeutic behavioral services. I worked on cases from Department of Probation, Department of Children and Family Services, and Department of Mental Health. I've worked with the homeless population, homeless veteran population, and then I took my skill set and ended up at South Central Los Angeles Regional Center, where I was a service coordinator. I did that, and then I was promoted to be the resource developer, where my job was to go out into the community to find clinical providers for the early start and children and adult services. So it would be clinicians, psychologists, doctors, dentists, hospitals, clinics, psychiatrists, anyone that would be providing clinical services to the community. And then from there, my wife and I, we moved out to San Bernardino and we bought a home, and I moved over here. Now I'm here at SCDD. Okay, so what I want to do is, you know, we talk about a lot of the experience. We talked about philosophy, we talked about laws, we talked about everything that has come to be, where we're trying to create these opportunities for the community that we serve. So thankfully, we have 3 individuals who are currently employed, who have gone through the process, who have gone through their challenges. And, you know, like everyone else, when, you know, when you're out there seeking employment, you're managing all these obstacles, rejection, possibilities, going on to a second job interview. I mean, all this anxiety that comes with finding an employment. So what I want to do now is introduce, we have Javier Alfonso, we have Ryan Nelson, and we have Alex Zambrano, who will be giving some insights to the community about their process of them finally deciding to find employment. Because as many of you guys know, it could be a very scary situation for a lot of individuals, okay? I know sometimes it may be tied to finances. You know, a lot of people really rely on an SSI check, but they don't necessarily know that there's programs out there that can support them to continue their path onto finding employment and becoming self-sustaining. Okay, so one of the questions I would like to ask Alex, Ryan, and Javier. Oh, and before I move on, I just wanted to let you know, we also have Keith Nelson, who is Ryan Nelson's father, who was part of his support system and helped him throughout the process of him finding employment, okay? But this question I wanna ask for the 3 individuals, Javier, Alex, and Ryan. Can you tell us your path to find employment in a chronological order of the events? What happened? When did you decide? What did you do to initiate that process? And where are you today? Who would like to take on that first?
I will.
Okay.
Well, before I got hired from Amazon Fresh, I was working as a janitor, and man, that was the most toxic environment I've had to deal with. And ever since October 29th, 2020, it took me about a year almost to finally get the job I wanted at Amazon Fresh. And after 11 months and 20 days of, almost 20 days of persistence, hard work, perseverance, never say die, and keep going, I finally got the job I wanted. I was originally going to work in the kitchen, but after IRI managed to pull some strings, I'm now working outbound, which basically means I fulfill customers' online grocery orders. And I have to move in a very timely and urgent manner, but I have to make sure I'm not giving the customer damaged, spoiled, just tampered with, or expired items unintentionally or intentionally. And I've been working there for about a year now, and I can say that everyone there really likes me. I've never missed a day. I'm always on. My secret, I'm always early, almost like 30 minutes early, minimum. Not to mention that not once have I been late. I've never I've never had to call in sick, nothing. And mind you, I'm an early riser for my every day, every morning, and I wake up at a uniform time, Monday through Sunday. And some people at my work even call me a model employee. Like, get this, I got 5 recognition cards under my belt and a reward pin for my work. And on top of that, ooh, hold on one second. David, I'm in the middle of a webinar. Get out of here. Sorry. Saying, I've actually been very diligent with my responsibilities, never missed it. Everyone there really, I pretty much am like an older brother figure at my job. And it is safe to say that everyone there loves me and they care about me and they ask me how I'm feeling mentally, physically, and if asking if I'm happy, you name it, they'll most likely tell me, they'll most likely ask if I'm feeling mentally fit and stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Javier. And I really appreciate your hard work, because I know every now and then I do order from Amazon Produce and I do get my veggies from there. So thank you so much for your hard work, okay?
Okay.
And keep up the good work, okay? You're a perfect example of all the opportunities that can exist out there, and people don't even know the great work ethic that our community is able to provide for them and their business, okay?
Of course. And my belief is this. I want all my opportunities and my success story the way it's supposed to be, earned, not given to you in a big old ribbon and a bow under a Christmas tree every year. And I definitely don't want my opportunities handed to me on a silver platter in a fancy 5-course restaurant.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Anyone else? Alex, go ahead, Alex.
Hello. Hi. My name is Alexander Sombrano. I work at the YMCA as an inclusion facilitator right now. I've been doing that for about 3 months. Prior to that, I was working with still at the YMCA, but as a childcare a childcare assistant. There's ranks to that anyway. I just want to start off by saying this has been a journey spanning 10 years. I actually, so 19 years old, graduated Ocean View High School. I got put in this experimental program called Adult Transition Program over at Marina. Was introduced to DOR, and I want to make a point of saying I have worked with services rendered to me or referred to me by DOR approximately 4 times over the past 10 years. And the most result I got out of it was being employed in a vegan restaurant for approximately 2 days. It wasn't until I had reached out to a new therapist that I had that they informed me, hey, Alexander, I'm working with this person named Suad from IRI. They would love to talk to you. And so I was like, okay, I'll give her a call. Suad tells me, yeah, hey, we can definitely help you, but you have to be, with regional center. So I'm thinking, now I want to be clear. When I got my diagnosis for autism back in 2006, it was actually referred to, and my specific diagnosis was actually referred to then as Asperger's syndrome. So prior, I think, to the release of the DSM-5, which put Asperger's under the autism umbrella, I could not receive services from regional center, or I was so told. What happened is that after 2013, 2020 rolls around, I actually applied regional center. They told me, hey, you actually qualify for our services because you have autism, which we now service, which we used to not. I don't know how it all works, but I was like, okay, great. So I worked with IRI and Suad and my whole team to really sort of cater and figure out, okay, what job works best for you. Now, I want to be clear. when it comes to, everything about job, like, I've been told I do good paperwork. I'm not sorry, not I do good paperwork. I do good work with whatever I do. I'm very diligent. I'm always on time, very consistent. The biggest hurdle, which is probably the smallest thing, but so vital, is the aspect of like applying on jobs, doing all that paperwork when it comes to onboarding. That whole process is incredibly overwhelming, which doesn't really make much sense, when considering all this stuff. So I came in while Suad was talking about how important discovery is in this whole, you know, um, helping the autistic community get employed. And I really do think that is important, because such minor details like that will often paint us, me autistic individuals, as lazy or uninspired or unmotivated, when in reality, it's a much more complicated and convoluted issue that I really feel discovery or something akin to that service would alleviate. So all that is to say, I worked with IRI, and I was able to find employment at the YMCA. I've been told all my life, like, hey, you should work. Hey, Alex, you should work with kids. Kids will love you. They'll look up to you. So I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. I apply. I do an interview, ace the interview, no problem. The gal who interviews me was like, oh, you're so, you're great. You sound like you'll be great for this. I'm like, okay, awesome. And then I find out the hours that I was promised, which, I don't have to talk about that, but the hours that I was promised were not the hours that I was suddenly working in the summer. So I'm like, well, that sounds kind of suspicious, but we'll move forward with it. So I'm working these hours that I wasn't planning to, doing all these things I wasn't really ready to do because I wasn't really sure. Childcare as a whole is just understaffed overall, but especially during the summer, this particular position was very tough. However, despite all that, I was ready to call it quits. I wanted to quit that day. The 2 week like resignation notice be damned. And so I talked to my supervisor, said, hey, I'm not so sure. I want to think about it. And then I reached out to my case carrier for Suad, for IRI, and they said, okay, wait. So they reached out to the YMCA, and we were at, and so through IRI's coordination with the YMCA, I was actually able to meet with the HR person for the YMCA, their local office here in Tustin. And we were able to sort of go, okay, maybe this isn't the position that's good for you, but we have this other position for a inclusion facilitator. You'd be working with, kids with school age, with certain disabilities such as cerebral palsy, autism, Asperger's, so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, I'm doing one-on-one. I'd be more than happy to give that a shot. And so naturally it was due to having that service, that advocacy with IRI, that I was actually able to retain the employment that I had just so recently gotten and transfer over to a new position that I actually very much enjoy now. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate you sharing the challenges that you face, right? Because just to let you know, we all, to a certain degree, there's certain processes that we dislike, right? Especially when it comes down to, filling out the information for taxes, because, a lot of us are not experts at filling out the W-2 forms, right? So yeah, I think you really covered a lot of the processes that individuals take on when they finally enter the workforce. There's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of doubts, and it doesn't only happen to individuals that are, that have a diagnosis or whatever the situation is. It happens to everyday people. When they first start a new task, it's a challenge, and you got to be able to have those self-talks. And it sounds like, Suad and her team were a great support to you, and they showed you that, hey, we don't quit. We just find the avenues. We got to advocate. We got to figure out and talk to people to see if there's other opportunities that can open up and help address your concerns or needs. So I'm glad. Thank you so much for sharing your success story and the path that you've taken. And clearly, I can see you smile when you talk about this job. So I know you're having a great time. So that's good to hear. Okay. Ryan, you're up, buddy. Your microphone's off, just to let you know. Okay.
Okay. Before I started working at Amazon in 2020, I worked in a work shelter program for almost 18 years. And I did a variety of jobs there. And in about 2017, 18, I finally decided I wanted to earn more than sub minimum wage. So I had my RC counselor send a referral to like VIP, and they helped me get an interview like at Home Depot, which didn't go well, but it was a learning experience for me, so I can learn what I need to work on and stuff. Then after that, I was able to get an interview at the Riverside Convention Center, where I got hired like almost not even 10 minutes after my interview. I was able, and I started almost like right away, and I loved working there. The people were very, very nice. I worked in the kitchen. I helped, clean the dishes, mop the floor, sweep, keep everything clean, help run the trash out, and I also help do food preparation where I'll be at the end of the thing, and I'll just sprinkle like either the Arizona, or I mean the little parsley or whatever. I did that for almost 2-3 years. Then suddenly COVID hit, and unfortunately I was laid off, and I had to earn unemployment for a little bit. But I finally just decided I didn't want to take money from the state, so I just jumped online and found Amazon. I had just applied, and then I had my interview, and I let my dad know. He has been one of my big supporters, and he took me to my interview. Fortunately, he couldn't come in, but I knew I could go in there and just do it myself. I had confidence, and I was able to start, I think, a couple of weeks after, or a week after, and I've been at Amazon for almost 2 years now. This is probably the highest paid job I had, besides working at the convention center, and also did some sign spinning with my brother. Did that for a little bit. But anyway, I earned at Amazon. I got full medical benefits. I have 401k. I have stock in Amazon, and recently I'm on the area. I was moved to the area readiness team, where I go in early, help get everything set up, run the cages, to the correct zone so they can be loaded to the correct trucks. Same with the pallets and go-karts. And I also I just got recently named to a fund committee which we do fun stuff for the employees, like where your favorite NFL team, baseball team, anything like that. And it's really fun. I'm just glad I was able to get this job at Amazon. I'm blessed to have a wonderful family. I have not only my dad, I have my mom and my brothers and sisters that helped me through this, and I hope I can move up in the company in more years. And also on the side business, when I'm not working at Amazon, I also am a part-time DJ. Yeah, my dad
That
helped
is-
me with that.
That's awesome. And you know, Ryan, I love the part where and everyone has mentioned this, but I love the part where you talk about your support system, right? It's very valuable to have that support system, whether it's a friend, whether it's your family, whether it's an organization that's dedicated to helping you get to where you want to be. I think that that's a key component, you know, because clearly you guys are a force to be reckoned with. It's clear you're showing up 30 minutes before work. And I can tell you right now that there's people that have issues with getting there on time. You know what I mean? And then there's people who don't come in and are passionate and driven and wanting to grow and go up in the, you know, in the ladder of the organization and get promoted and seek a higher position. I mean, there's people who enter the workforce and just want to be there. And I think that you guys are a perfect example of the value that you guys bring to an organization or a company.
Yeah.
Keith, would you like to provide some information, insight on Ryan's process and progress that you've seen him develop as he moved from going, and clearly COVID was a big issue, right? Because COVID stopped a lot of employment opportunities, but I'm sure that, you know, you played a big role in this whole process.
Well, over his life, he's always wanted to work. When he was younger, he interned with me doing some making computer cables, and he was worked in a mailroom at a software company. But I think the real valid point to make is it's a progression. He went from having support. His last job, he got all on his own. I didn't even know he did it. He came upstairs one day and just said, "I have an interview tomorrow." And I said, "How did you do that?" He goes, "I found it online." But it was through a series of steps. And I think that's important. He was active with the regional center. He was on the CAC, and he even interviewed for a job there that he didn't get. But the important thing was he did a post-mortem. He talked to them and said, you know, "Why didn't you hire me? And how can I improve my interview and my resume?" And he, every opportunity he had, he went to the Inland Regional Center classes when they taught him how to do interviews and job training. And he worked at his first job out of on his own with the Riverside Convention Center. He had a job coach, and then he did the process that was pointed out earlier, that it migrated down to none, or just once a week to check how he was doing. But it's a process, and it's a learning experience. And I think one of the things, because I've been involved in the community with coaching and so on, is I just like to tell everyone that you have to keep trying, that you're going to fail. So you might as well fail at something you want to do. And eventually those failures are going to add to you winning. And as long as you keep your confidence up and you realize, learn from what happens, learn from every resource you can, and then you become very independent. And I'm kind of I guess, a social justice warrior, in the sense where I say, one of our basic human rights is dignity and respect, and everyone's entitled to that. But that starts with self-respect. And when people are employed and they realize they're accomplishing something every day, and 4 10-hour shifts and takes overtime, and a lot of people say I shouldn't do this, but we go out to dinner and he says it's his turn to pay, and that's part of respect. He can, and that independence and the ability, he can order things online without even having to talk to me because he has his own money. And that's a growing experience. And I think if we work together as a community and a group and use all our resources, we can really help out, including with something that was pointed out earlier is we're all, all of us as parents and care providers, we can find leads that can be put into the system. The Riverside Convention Center, which used to be a client of mine, now wants to hire more individuals to work in their kitchen. So, and then like Phoenix Fire Development, which I just turned over, which I met with them, and they said we'll hire people in the intellectually developmentally disabled community. If we work together, to coin a phrase, it kind of takes a village. I like to say more takes a community of us working together.
Thank you, Keith. That is very true. It does take a village. It does take a support system. I absolutely agree with you on that. And here in the Inland Empire, I know that our regional manager, Patricia, who's not here today, is definitely focused on making those connections. So don't be surprised if we reach out so we can begin to help, build the bridges and to create those avenues for our community. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the insight, the information, your passion, your drive. It's very important. And like he said, having employment is a human right and builds dignity, and you have a self-worth, and you guys bring value to the organizations you guys work for. Okay, and I'm glad that I got to meet you all today. Okay, Beth, I'm handing this back off to you. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Esteban. That was a wonderful panel, and thank each of you for your candor and sharing your experiences. It was wonderful to hear of your journeys and your heart and your determination, and you inspired me. So thank you, just to keep working at it. I appreciate all of you. Suad, thank you so much for all the great information. Things are constantly changing, but I appreciate your willingness to share the latest on employment and answer all the questions. Esteban, you were great at the panel. Thank you. I appreciate it. Keith, I haven't seen you in a while. Nice to see you. I think you and Ryan are competing with the beards there. So I think Keith's winning right now, but that's great. It was lovely to have all of you guys. Thank you to the panel. I don't know if you can see in the chat, you're getting lots of thank you and appreciation. So thank you again to Miriam for translating tonight. We will be sending out the video link tomorrow, and it will be up on our website. You can always email us, and we're happy to connect you with State Council or IRR. Get you a little more information about Department of Rehab, but we appreciate everybody in our community. So thank you guys, stay safe out there, and thanks for being here tonight. Bye.
See you tomorrow, bud. All right.